We're live.
Nice.
Here we are. We are live. Welcome to Going Deeper, Volume 2. This is our second of our YouTube summer devotionals. Wyatt's over here. He's pulling up his YouTube stream so we can see you and we can talk to you and we can interact with you. So while we are pulling that up and while people are coming on, we're just going to kind of hang out here for a minute. We have one viewer, and guess who that viewer is?
Right here.
So we're going to wait for some of you guys to jump on and study the Bible with us. So Wyatt, what do we do to pass the time? Do we sing?
We definitely sing.
I don't know if we want to do that. I don't know if
that'd
be good. Yeah, my daughter's here this morning or this afternoon. She would definitely sing and dance for you. But I don't think you want to see Wyatt and I singing or dancing together. That may be a little disturbing. So we've been having a lot of fun this week, 4th of July. Wyatt's been shooting off a lot of bottle rockets. Let's just leave it at that. So a lot of people shooting off fireworks. Nobody got hurt. Nobody got injured.
My hands are
we will call that a win for health and safety. So still waiting for some of you guys to get on here. So if you're watching this and you're watching the recording of this and you want to kind of go ahead and just be ready, we're going to be in Exodus 3. We're going to be talking about Moses. Moses was an interesting guy. Do you think he was nicknamed Mo? I don't know. I don't know if that's correct in the Hebrew, actually. So we've kind of had a slow week here this week. Didn't have your refuel on Wednesday night, so it's kind of
a lot of closets.
Yeah, we've been cleaning out a lot of closets. We found a lot of things from years ago, old refuel artifacts.
And a lot of those things we found in the trash.
Yeah, a lot of those things ended up in trash, so we didn't really we didn't keep much of it. We found sprinklers. We found what's the weirdest thing that you found in the closet so far?
Oh, the weirdest thing?
We've had some weird things in the closet.
Found a bunch of capes.
Yeah, we found sunglasses and capes.
I don't know why.
I don't know. So
I think I'll wear it on Wednesday.
So we're gonna give people another minute or two to jump on here. We'll see. One viewer so far. So should we get on the Instagram and tell people to jump on?
I'll hop on here.
Tell them to hop on the sauce. Hop off the sauce. Photo. Eric could not take photo.
Why couldn't we take a selfie?
It was not prepared to handle all this handsomeness in one picture.
Nothing normally is.
Hop on YouTube. We're live on our Refuel Students account. Exclamation point.
Gotta be real excited.
There we go. Okay. Well, what we're going to do is we were going to go ahead and jump in here because we're live now. This will be recorded, so anybody can come back on and watch this and get involved with this. So we're going to go ahead and get started. We'll start with prayer. If while we're doing this, you have prayer requests that you would like us to pray for, just put it in. I'm looking at Wyatt's computer there, but you can put it in the chat on the right here next to this live stream, and we will read it. And at the end of our Devo, we will have a prayer time, and we will mention your request. So let's pray, and we're going to dig in. Father, thank you for this opportunity where we can gather together online. It's not quite the same as gathering together in person. God, this is something you've given us, so I pray that we'll use it to your full advantage. I pray that we'll use this to grow closer to you, and as we go deeper into your word, God, that you will open up new truths to us, things maybe in these passages we've never seen before, and help us to get a big understanding, the big picture of what you're doing. In Jesus' name, amen. So like I said, we're going deeper. So when we go deeper, what does that mean? Well, it means we're digging into certain parts of the Bible that are either A, hard to understand, or B, we just kind of get bored with them and we think we've read all there is to read, and turns out there's actually more here than we think. So we're going deeper, and Exodus chapter 3 is where we're going. Last week we talked about Noah. We talked about the flood. We talked about the Nephilim, which was interesting. Some of you think you're the Nephilim, but you're not. We talked about how God has to deal severely with sin, with people that go against his law because he's a just God, and how the flood was representative and it was part of God's wrath, but how on the cross Jesus took the full measure of God's wrath upon him that was due to us, so that rather than being objects of wrath, we can be objects of God's grace. Fast forward several hundred years. The earth has repopulated, right, since the flood. It's no longer Noah, his 3 sons, and their wives, but now it's a lot of people, a lot of nations, and kind of come in. We hear about Moses, and we'll start reading through. We're going to read just chapter 3. Last week we read a lot. It was like 15 minutes worth of reading. Today it's not going to be so much. We're just going to read chapter 3 of Exodus. So I'm going to read part of it, and Wyatt's going to read part of it, and then we're going to jump in and talk about it. So let's read. Let's do it. Chapter 3 of Exodus, verse 1. Now Moses was tending the flock of Jethro, his father-in-law, the priest of Midian. And he led the flock to the far side of the wilderness, and he came to Horeb, the mountain of God. There an angel of the Lord appeared to him in the flames of fire within a bush. Moses saw that through the bush, Moses saw that though the bush was on fire, it did not burn up. So Moses thought, I'll go over and see this strange sight, why the bush does not burn up. When the Lord saw that he had gone over to look, God called from within the bush, Moses, Moses. And Moses said, Here I am. Don't come any closer, God said. Take off your sandals, for the place where you're standing is holy ground. Then he said, I'm the God of your father, the God of Abraham, the God of Isaac, and the God of Jacob. At this, Moses hid his face because he was afraid to look at God. The Lord said, I've indeed seen the misery of my people in Egypt. Found something I want to highlight. I have heard them crying out because of their slave drivers, and I'm concerned about their suffering. So I've come down to rescue them from the hand of the Egyptians and to bring them up out of that land into a good and spacious land, a land flowing with milk and honey, the home of the Canaanites, Hittites, Amorites, Perizzites, Hivites, and Jebusites, but no termites. And now the cry of Israel has reached me, and I have seen the way the Egyptians are oppressing them. So now go. I'm sending you to Pharaoh to bring my people, the Israelites, out of Egypt. But, there's a but. But Moses said to God, Who am I that I should go to Pharaoh and bring the Israelites out of Egypt? And God said, I will be with you. And this will be a sign to you that it is I who have sent you. When you have brought the people out of Egypt, you will worship God on this mountain. What?
Then Moses said to God, If I come to the people of Israel and say to them, The God of your fathers has sent me to you, and they ask me, What is his name? What shall I say to them? God said to Moses, I am who I am. And he said, Say this to the people of Israel, I am has sent me to you. God also said to Moses, Say this to the people of Israel, The Lord, the God of your fathers, the God of Abraham, the God of Isaac, and the God of Jacob, has sent me to you. This is my name forever, and thus I am to be remembered throughout all generations. Go and gather the elders of Israel together and say to them, The Lord, the God of your fathers, the God of Abraham, of Isaac, and of Jacob, has appeared to me, saying, I have observed you in what has been done to you in Egypt. And I promise that I will bring you up out of the affliction of Egypt to the land of the Canaanites, the Hittites, the Amorites, the Perizzites, the Hivites, and the Jebusites.
Not the termites.
Not termites. A land flowing with milk and honey. And they will listen to your voice, and you and the elders of Israel shall go to the king of Egypt and say to him, the Lord, the God of the Hebrews, has met with us. And now, please let us go a 3 days' journey into the wilderness, that we may sacrifice to the Lord our God. But I know that the king of Egypt will not let you go unless compelled by a mighty hand. So I will stretch out my hand and strike Egypt with all the wonders that I will do in it. After that he will let you go. And I will give this people favor in the sight of the Egyptians, and when you go, you shall not go empty. But each woman shall ask of her neighbor, and any woman who lives in her house, for silver and gold jewelry and for clothing. You shall put them on your sons and on your daughters, so you shall plunder the Egyptians.
Right. So, it's an interesting passage. It deals with fire, so it's appropriate for this week out of the year, 4th of July. I guess you could say this is God's 4th of July lesson, because we have America, of course, celebrates Independence Day with fireworks, 4th of July. Israel's independence from Egypt, fireworks, burning bushes. I hope you didn't set any bushes on fire last night. So that, here what we do is when we study the Bible, we just go through 3 steps. First step is we observe. We look and see what there is in the Bible, in the passage we read, that is interesting and that jumps off the page at us. The next thing we do is we interpret. We find out, okay, what's the truth in this passage? What do we learn about God? What do we learn about us? What do we learn about what's right by this passage? And then finally, how do we apply it to our lives? How do we live out the truth that we learned in this passage? So we'll start by observing. So binoculars on, and we're gonna observe. So what do you see, Wyatt?
Well, I mean, the first thing you got to talk about is, the bush. Like, what's going on there? As soon as you start reading, you see God popping up in a bush. So, you can't help but miss that.
Yeah. So does that mean God, if he wants to speak to me today, he's going to set my shrubbery on fire?
I've been hanging out in the forest at home, hoping it would happen.
Yeah. If you're waiting for God to set your bushes on fire, you may be waiting a little while, because this is the only time in the Bible where we see God setting a bush on fire. God is a little bit of a pyromaniac, though. He sets a lot of things on fire. So maybe that's part of his image in us, that we like to set things on fire. Yeah, so I guess you start with the bush, right? That's weird. That's interesting. It says that the bush was on fire, but it didn't burn up. Now, I've set some things on fire before.
And they always burn up.
And yeah, they always burn up really quick, especially if you pour about a gallon of gas on it. So this bush was on fire, but nobody, the bush wasn't being burned up. It was just still crisp or just still green and everything. So that was weird. It got Moses' attention. So Moses is by himself. So who's Moses? Wyatt, who's Moses?
You got to kind of, whenever you observe and read a passage like Matt just asked, one of the good questions to ask is, what's the context? Because you could open up your Bible and play the game of, I'll just open it up, and wherever God wants me to read, I'll read, and you're in a random passage, and you've never heard of this guy Moses, so what's going on?
Who is this guy? Yeah.
We're kind of introduced to him. We're in Exodus 3. We're introduced to Moses in chapter 2, just the chapter before. But surrounding it, like, you look at the context, that Moses is a Jewish guy. He was born in a time that Pharaoh, the king of Egypt, had said that he was going to kill all of the Hebrew males because he wanted to dwindle down the population. So Moses' mom did what any caring mom would do. She wanted him to live and put him in the Nile River. And ironically enough, he flowed straight to Pharaoh's palace, but was adopted by Pharaoh's daughter and raised up as an Egyptian, even though he was a Hebrew. So that's kind of the context that we're in right now.
Yeah, so Moses had a pretty wild life. He started as a baby, floating down a river in a basket. Just so happens that the king's daughter finds him and takes him into the palace. He's raised as a prince, Prince of Egypt, the movie. He's raised as a prince, and then he just can't stand to see, because he finds out who he is. He finds out he's Hebrew, and he sees his people being mistreated, actually being in slavery. So he comes across this one Egyptian guy who is mistreating one of his people, one of the Hebrew people, and Moses kills him. So Moses was, I guess he had a short fuse. He was also apparently a strong guy. He could just like randomly kill people. But after doing that, he's a wanted man, right? He's wanted for murder. So he leaves Egypt. He finds him a woman.
Has some kids.
Has some babies. His father-in-law has flocks of sheep. So he becomes a shepherd. And he's just doing his shepherd thing. Maybe feels like God's forgotten about him because it's been how long, and he's just tending to these sheep. And all of a sudden, bam, bush is on fire. And then the bush starts speaking. So that's weird too. And it doesn't just speak, it starts saying his name. It says Moses, Moses, Moses. So that's, Moses is like, okay, something's going on here. And he comes a little closer, and then the voice says, hey, I'm God. So Moses understood that this was God, and God had this message for him. And he said, I've seen the misery of my people, Egypt. Then he kind of promises Moses, hey, I've come to rescue your people, which is good news to Moses. He's going to take them into this land that's flowing with milk and honey. What does that mean? Like, are there a lot of cows? Is there a lot of cows in here? Probably. Like a lot of like dairy products in this, and a lot of dairy products and bees. Is that what this means? It says land flowing with milk and honey. So it's kind of a picture of a land that is a beautiful land. It will take care of them. It's got enough food resources. So it's just a really good, as it says, a good and spacious land. It actually says that twice: land with milk and honey, land with milk and honey. And then God kind of drops the bomb on him. He says, I'm sending you to Pharaoh. And then, of course, in verse 11, you have the but. It says, but Moses said, who am I that I should go to Pharaoh and bring the Israelites out of Egypt? He's like, I'm a wanted man. Like, I can't go back to Egypt. And God gives him a promise, I'll be with you. And Moses still doesn't, he struggles trusting God. And he says, well, who should I say sent me? And God says, tell them I am who I am. And it's kind of, Moses has all these questions. Even into chapter 4, Moses says, well, what if they don't believe me? Moses just keeps, we identify with him, like, I think.
I think too, in that passage, something I noticed, I circled or underlined every time the word I was used in that passage. It's like God and Moses are kind of almost having a little argument.
Yeah.
Moses says to God, who am I that I should go to Pharaoh and bring the children of Israel? And then God immediately says, but I will be with you. And then Moses will retort, but what about I? And God says, no, I am. And it's just this who's who kind of thing here.
So we've kind of observed, we've looked. Another thing I noticed is that the figure of speech, hand, is used several times. In verse 8, it says, God says to Moses, I've come down to rescue them, the Israelites, from the hand of the Egyptians. Verse 19, it says, Moses is saying, I know that the king of Egypt will not let you go unless a mighty hand comes, or this is God speaking, I'm sorry. I know that the king of Egypt will not let you go unless a mighty hand compels them. So I will stretch out my hand and strike the Egyptians. So we see that play on words, the hand, like strength. So what do we learn? So what are the truths that we've observed? So what are some truths we're interpreting now? What are the truths that we learn about God, about us, and about what's right and wrong in this passage? What do you think, Wyatt?
I think one of the first questions to ask is to make sense of everything is what's the rest of the Bible kind of have to say about it.
Okay. Yeah. So what does the rest of the Bible say?
One thing to kind of look at to start is, look at verse 6. This is God talking to Moses when he appears to him in the bush, and it says, and he said, I am the God of your father, the God of Abraham, the God of Isaac, and the God of Jacob. And like I mentioned earlier, which is kind of randomly opening the Bible, if you're not familiar with these guys, you're going to go, why on earth is this significant?
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
And just kind of a general rule of thumb is if you're reading the Bible and something is referenced in the context that doesn't seem to fit the context, it's mentioned somewhere else in the Bible. And if you look up where that is and what it's referring to, it's going to make the context of this make so much more sense. Because the first person he mentioned, when God comes to Moses, he goes, I'm the God of Abraham. And we kind of skipped over the rest of the book of Genesis last week, which meant we didn't see the story of Abraham. But what God did with Abraham is he selected him and called him and said he was going to be the father of Israel, the Jewish people, that he would have more descendants than the stars in the sky. And there was a promise that the Messiah, we know to be Jesus, was going to come through him. And God worked through Abraham's life in a mighty way, and then his son Isaac and then Jacob. And he started working through these guys' lives all through the book of Genesis.
Yeah.
And then now when he comes to Moses and goes, I'm their God, he's telling Moses, I'm going to work through you just as much as I worked through them. He's establishing the truth of what he's going to do.
Yeah. And in verse 15, when it says, I'm the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, then it says, this is my name forever. You shall call me, this name you shall call me from generation to generation. And Abraham, Isaac, Jacob were like the great grandfathers of Moses. They were the fathers of this nation that Moses was in. So, God is talking to Moses. He's giving him this promise. So we'll keep looking through some truths that we learn from this passage. One truth we can see is that God's hand is stronger than the hand of even the strongest king. Pharaoh's hand was considered to be strong. He had this grip on the Israelites. I mean, he had them in slavery. He had them in captivity, and even Moses is like really concerned because he's like, yeah, I know, God, you said you're going to deliver them, but do you realize that Pharaoh has chariots and Pharaoh has, spears, and he has all these terrible things, and we've tried to, I tried to kill a guy to get Israel out and it didn't work. God says he's not going to let you go unless a mighty hand compels him. So I will stretch out my hand and strike the Egyptians. So God is the strongest, I guess. I don't know if that's a good way to say it, but God is strong. God is stronger. So
I think another one is Moses' response to God. I think we can all identify with a little bit, that sometimes God calls us to do some scary things, and we go, but do you think I can really do that? And I think it's safe to say while reading this that Moses seemed to really doubt. But if you go to Hebrews chapter 11, which I can read it. I'll go ahead and flip there if you guys want to as well. You go to Hebrews chapter 11. We read about Moses here, and it says in Hebrews chapter 11, verse 23, by faith, Moses, when he was born, was hidden for 3 months by his parents because they saw that the child was beautiful and they were not afraid of the king. Then verse 24, by faith, Moses, when he was grown up, refused to be called the son of Pharaoh's daughter. Go down to verse 27. By faith, he left Egypt, not being afraid. But we look back in the Exodus account, he honestly seems to be a little bit afraid. And then in verse 27 of Hebrews 11, it's saying he wasn't afraid, he had faith. By verse 28, by faith, he kept the Passover. So all these things that Moses was doing by faith, at first we see in Exodus, he seemed pretty scared.
Yeah. So what does that tell us about faith? What does that tell us about faith? Could it be that Moses's faith was not so much dependent on himself, but it was dependent on God? Moses, you see here, he's struggling in his faith, yet God still used him.
Yeah.
And I think maybe the reason that God still used him comes back to verse 4, when God says, Moses, Moses, and Moses just simply says, here I am. Moses was concerned about how God was going to use him. Moses was a little apprehensive, but he didn't let that stop him from making himself available to God. Faith isn't found in our ability, but it's found in our availability to God. Oh, I want to write that one down. Faith isn't about ability, but about availability.
I think too, with along the lines of faith, that sometimes it can be presented a little bit poorly, in the sense of, okay, like faith is this picture of you're 100% fearless, you trust God with everything, you don't ever question it. That's what faith is. If you truly have faith, you would never question it.
I want to be fearless.
Go for it. We got to break out the dancing now, right? But thing is, though, faith doesn't mean that we're not going to question. It doesn't mean that we're not going to be afraid. It means that we're going to follow even though we are questioning and even though we are afraid. God doesn't expect us to never doubt or question.
Exactly.
He expects us to still trust him nonetheless. We can be honest with him about that, man. God, I don't know what you're doing here. I'm kind of scared. I'm kind of nervous. And that's where faith kicks in and go, despite that, I'm still going to walk with you. I'm still going to trust him. Yeah.
So just because you don't have it all figured out, just because you're a little nervous, struggle in your faith, doesn't mean your faith isn't strong. We see that here with Moses. For anything else we see as far as truth goes, yeah, I think you have to almost look at the fact that we see God here, that God saves and God is a deliverer. The whole reason God raised Moses up is because God delivers people from bondage and from slavery, specifically slavery to sin. And in verse 7 it says, I have indeed seen the misery of my people in Egypt. The Israelites in Egypt have been enslaved for hundreds of years. Now I wonder if in the back of their minds they thought, I wonder if God forgot about us. You know, we hear these stories about Abraham and, you know, who's our great-great-great-grandfather, and his faith and how God spoke to him, and where is he now? We're in slavery. So God always delivers. God always delivers on his promise. So that could be something else. Yeah.
Another big truth, just kind of in the context of the whole chapter of the bush, is you read it and you say, oh, that's kind of weird. Just a general truth is that God doesn't always appear to us how we expect him to. And that the fact that maybe God does things weirdly sometimes is because he knows that's the only way to really get our attention. Like Moses was obviously fleeing from God and running from him. He murders the guy, goes out, gets married, spends time kind of tending the flocks of his father-in-law. He's kind of doing his own gig. And God just lights the bush up and starts yelling at him, Moses, Moses. Like there was no way he could get out of that. So I think that no matter whether we're running or whatever we're doing, that God can still appear to us and he will.
Oh, yeah. So we got some truths here. How do we apply this? How do we live this out? It's Thursday afternoon, 3:30. Hot day outside. How do we live this out? I see here two kind of points that we've come up with as we're studying. That God is stronger, and that faith isn't about ability, but about availability. So how about this? I'm going to make myself available to God today. I'm going to write that down. I'm not one of those people who can talk and write at the same time. So, making ourselves available to God means we have to put what we had planned aside for a little bit. Maybe we'll get to go back to it. Maybe not. We have, we're putting aside what we had planned and saying, God, whatever you have planned for me today, I'll do it. Yeah. I'll take those divine appointments. I'll take the weird people you put into my life. God will put weird people into your life. Trust me.
Wow.
Yeah, I'll take the weirdness that you put in my life. I'll take the fact that I'm stuck at home with my little sister all day. Here I am, God. I'm available. Whatever it is, make yourself available to God.
I think for some people, an immediate application might be to stop running from God.
Oh yeah.
It's easy to think, look at Moses. He killed a guy, and he was kind of on the run. He was fleeing. And, how many things have we done in our life that makes us kind of question, are we worthy? Is God really going to use me? And just stop running. It'd be a shame if, because we were running and not opening our eyes, that we missed a bush that God was lighting up in our life. He's always going to try to reach you. You just got to stop running and let him do that.
Yeah, no, that's good. That's good. God always delivers on his promise. So what if we looked for how God was working in our lives today? Yeah, it's one thing to make yourself available. It's another thing to look and watch for what God is going to be doing. So, God's going to use some weird ways to work in your life. Burning bushes. What I've seen a weird way I've seen God working a lot lately is Fortnite. I don't even play the stupid game. But I see I've heard from a lot of you guys that are actually reaching people, talking to people, inviting people to church through Fortnite. Awesome. If God can speak through a burning bush, he can speak through Xbox. There's a lot of bad things on Xbox, a lot of bad language. What if you turned the tables on the devil? And God works in weird ways. So make yourself open to God.
Stay tuned to start looking at God's power and not your own weakness. That's kind of the big argument that Moses and God were having here. God says, I'm going to use you. And Moses goes, who am I? You're going to use me? And God kept saying, no, I, like, look at me. And Moses actually had a speech impediment, and he tells Moses to go to the Pharaoh and tell him what's up. He's like, I can't do that. And then actually go tell all of Israel what I'm going to do. He's like, I can't do that. And he was forgetting that God had it all planned out. So just when God calls you to do something, whether you feel like you're adequate or not, don't look at yourself and just trust God who called you.
Trust God and do it.
Trust and do.
Do it.
Do it.
Do it. So there you go. We went deeper. Exodus 3, burning bush. You learned about it in Sunday school. Now you're learning about it in real life. So make yourself available to God today. If you're running from him, stop and open yourself up to the weird things and the weird opportunities God puts. God is a very interesting God. I've never been bored following God. I've been bored trying to find stuff to do on my own, but I've never been bored following God. So open yourself up to the weird opportunities God gives you.
Next week, we're in Exodus 20.
Yeah, Exodus 20 next week.
We got
the 10 Commandments and the law. Not just the 10 Commandments, some other interesting, weirdish things. So yeah, we'll be doing that next week. So thank you guys for joining us today. Get wet. Get in the pool. It's way too hot to be outside without being in the pool. Right. Get in the pool. Stay in the pool. Don't leave the pool till the end of the week when it gets cooler.
But don't get super sunburned like me.
Yeah, Wyatt's got. Show them your weird tan line.
So I put sunscreen on.
Yeah,
and I guess I put it really heavy on one spot, and now I just have this random white spot, sunburn everywhere, perfectly white here.
It looks like it looks like the shape of like.
I was trying to make a heart for my mom.
Yeah, it's not a heart,
but it failed.
It looks like a little whale. You're like one of those white girls.
Vineyard Vines representative.
Yeah. So, okay. Well, thank you guys for joining us. Have a great rest of the day. We love you.